My horrifying experience when I broke into a home. Hillcrest Lane is a quiet place, the kind of suburban street where every house looks the same, big lawns, two-car garages, lights off by 10 p.m. You'd think a place like this would have advanced security cameras or alarms. But that's the thing about people in neighborhoods like this. They don't expect trouble. They assume danger stays far away in these parts of town. Lucky for guys like me, they're wrong. I was standing in the shadows just outside the side gate of a house that I'd been watching for a couple of weeks. It belonged to a guy in his early 40s, lived alone, and worked a boring 9-to-5 job. Every night he came home, parked his car in the driveway, and disappeared inside until morning. No guests, no family, just him. I waited just to be sure, glancing at my phone. 11:42 p.m. The lights had been off for over an hour. Perfect. The gate creaked softly as I pushed it open, slipping into the backyard. I'd chosen this house for a reason. No dog, had an alarm system that I could easily defuse, and a sliding glass door with a lock I could easily pick. Put on my gloves and started working on the door, and within 2 minutes, I was in. Inside, the house was dark and still. My eyes adjusted quickly as I took in the layout. Living room to the left, kitchen straight ahead, a staircase leading to the second floor. My heart raced, but it was the familiar thrill of the job, the rush of knowing I was in someone else's space, with their belongings at my fingertips. I made my way through the living room, careful to step lightly, no need to rush. I'd start upstairs, go through the bedroom, grab anything valuable, then be on my way out, easy peasy. But as I reached the bottom of the stairs, something caught my attention. A door, half open, at the end of the hall. The smell hit me first. It was not rotten or bad, but smelled more like a strong disinfectant, like bleach or formaldehyde. I couldn't tell for sure, and it made me want to know more. I flicked on my flashlight and shone it down the narrow staircase. I realized it was a basement, but something was off, way off. I descended the stairs slowly, the beam of my flashlight bouncing off the walls. At the bottom, the basement opened up into a larger room, but this wasn't the kind of basement people use for storage or laundry. The floor was smooth, polished concrete, the walls lined with thick, soundproofing foam. A large metal table sat in the middle, surrounded by strange tools. Scalpels, pliers, some other instruments I didn't recognize. And on the shelves lining the walls, glass jars. Dozens and dozens of them, neatly arranged, each one holding something small and twisted. I stepped closer, holding my breath, as my flashlight revealed their contents. Locks of hair tied into little knots, floating in some kind of liquid, and not just hair. Other things too. Fingernails, teeth, eyeballs. I stumbled back, my heart slamming in my chest. My hand knocked into something on the table, sending it clattering to the floor. It was a book. I bent down to pick it up, my hands trembling as I flipped it open. It was an album. The first photo was of a woman, mid-20s, smiling into the camera. The next page showed her again, but this time, her smile was gone. Her eyes were wide, filled with terror, and her hands were bound behind her back. The third photo, she was dead. The life drained from her face, her skin pale, her mouth frozen in a final silent scream. And the same thing repeated over and over, with each time the victim being a different person. I slammed the album shut, bile rising in my throat. At that moment, I realized of all the houses I had at my disposal, I picked one that belonged to a serial killer. And then I heard something that made the hair at the back of my neck stand on end, a soft whimper, faint but unmistakable. I turned, sweeping the room with my flashlight, and froze. In the far corner, strapped to a metal chair, was a woman. Her wrists and ankles were bound, and duct tape gagged her mouth. Her eyes, wide and terrified, locked onto mine. She was alive. I rushed to her, ripping the tape from her mouth. She gasped, trembling, tears streaking down her cheeks. "Please, help me," she rasped, her voice barely a whisper. "He's coming back?" Ice filled my veins. I fumbled with the ropes binding her, my hands shaking so badly that they kept slipping. Her eyes darted toward the stairs, terror creeping into me, spreading like wildfire. We had seconds. Maybe, then we heard it. Not footsteps, but the quiet hum of a nearby TV screen flickering on. It showed grainy footage from cameras inside the house, each room, each window. One by one, we watched as the windows sealed themselves, thick metal slabs sliding into place with a heavy finality. Doors slammed shut and locked, as if triggered by some automated system. Everything was locking down, as if a failsafe had been activated. We were trapped. Planet clawed at my throat. I spun around, my flashlight flickering just as the sound of footsteps echoed from the stairs. No, 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 I whispered, backing away. Then he appeared. The man who clicked those dreadful photos. The homeowner. He stood at the foot of the stairs, calm as death, with a look of twisted amusement. His eyes flicked between me and the woman, as if deciding who to kill first. In his hand, he held a long, gleaming knife. "You're not supposed to be here," he said, his voice low and almost disappointed. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but there was nowhere to go, nowhere to hide. If I had any chance of escape, I'd have to get past him first. And even then, the whole place was sealed shut. He started down the stairs, slow, savoring every moment. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find, a metal rod, and held it in front of me, desperate. My heart pounded so loudly it drowned out everything else. "Stay back," I shouted, but my voice wavered, unconvincing. He smiled, a slow, deliberate grin that sent chills down my spine. "You don't understand," he said, voice calm, almost playful. "This is my home. You're the intruder." Before I could react, he lunged at me. I swung the rod with everything I had, but he was too fast. His knife slashed across my arm, sending a searing jolt of pain through me. Blood poured from the wound, staining the floor, and I fought to stay on my feet as dizziness washed over me. At that moment, I realized I wasn't getting out of here alive. Not in this basement, not against him. He lunged again, knocking the rod from my hands. It clattered uselessly to the floor as I fell back, crashing hard. The air rushed out of my lungs as he pinned me down with his foot, pressing against my chest. The knife glinted in the dim light, raised slowly, aimed at my throat. This was it. Time slowed as I braced for the end, watching the blade descend. But then she appeared out of nowhere. The woman I'd freed, bloodied and trembling, but alive. She swung the rod I'd dropped with all her strength, a raw, primal scream ripping from her throat as the heavy metal connected with the back of the killer's skull. The crack echoed through the basement. His body crumpled on top of me, unconscious, his knife clattering to the floor. I shoved him off, gasping for air, my chest heaving. Together, we bound him to the metal chair, making sure he couldn't move. His head lolled to the side, blood dripping from the gash in his skull. He was out cold. But we didn't take any chances. The house was still locked down, but the woman, her name was Sarah, knew how to disable the security system. She'd been watching him, learning. Within minutes, the doors clicked open. We didn't waste a second. We ran through the basement, up into the house, and out into the night. Cold air finally hit my face like a slap, and for the first time since stepping into that nightmare, I felt like I could breathe again. My arm throbbed, but I didn't care. We reached the street, and Sarah, with trembling hands, started calling the cops with the phone she had retrieved from the killer's pocket while tying him up. I simply collapsed onto the curb, staring up at the night sky, rain falling in soft droplets. I was alive. I had come so close. Too close. But I made it. As the distant wail of sirens grew louder, I closed my eyes, whispering a silent thank you to God, and quietly slipped out of there before the cops arrived. I'd been reckless, greedy. I'd walked into the wrong place, thinking it would be easy. But I survived. After that night, I never developed the urge to rob again. We visited a house that belonged to a serial killer. We were just a stupid group of friends, Tom, Ezekiel, Sarah, and me, Ethan, always getting ourselves into trouble in our little town on the outskirts of Serbia. It was freezing most of the time, the kind of cold that made your breath hang in the air, but we didn't care. We were young and dumb, ignoring the warnings of kidnappings from our school, convinced it could never happen to us. One day as we walked home, Tom, with his usual reckless grin, suggested we check out an old abandoned house at the edge of town. The place was infamous. It had once been home to a man who was discovered to be a serial killer. The guy had been dead for years, but the rumors about him still spread like wildfire. I didn't want to go. Something about it felt wrong. But dares started and I caved, like I always did. The house was worse than I imagined. The windows were boarded up, but inside it looked like the remnants of a forgotten past. Old, broken furniture, faded wallpaper peeling off the walls. There was something eerie about how untouched it seemed. Each room carried an unsettling silence, like the house had been waiting for us. It didn't take long for us to get bored, though. That's when Tom suggested we check out the basement. My stomach twisted, but I followed them. The stairs creaked beneath our feet as we descended into the pitch-black basement. Our flashlights cut through the darkness, revealing strange things. Books scattered on the floor, and markings that looked like remnants of some black magic rituals. I remember thinking that maybe the stories were true, that the killer wasn't just a murderer, but something worse. We debated what to do next when suddenly Tom collapsed. One moment he was standing, the next he hit the floor like a sack of bricks. I barely had time to react before Ezekiel fell too. Sarah let out a rasping cough, collapsing next, her eyes wide with fear. Panic surged through me, but I couldn't move. My vision blurred, and I was the last to hit the ground. When I finally woke up, there was a light, harsh and flickering, shining down on me. My body ached, and when I tried to move, I realized my wrists were chained. As my eyes adjusted, I saw the others, Tom, Ezekiel, and Sarah, chained beside me. We were all awake now, disoriented and terrified. "I'm so hungry," Tom whimpered. Ezekiel groaned in agreement. "Where are we?" I asked, my voice shaking. No one answered. Instead, the sound of footsteps echoed from above. The basement door swung open and down came a figure. My blood ran cold. It was him, the man who was supposed to be dead, the serial killer. His skin was pale, his eyes sunken and lifeless, but he was very much alive. "Good morning, children." His voice was a gravelly whisper that sent chills through me. Tom screamed, "You're supposed to be dead." "You're not real," Sarah cried, her voice breaking. The old man just smiled, a twisted grin spreading across his face. "Death fears me. The devil is my servant." What followed was worse than any nightmare I could have imagined. He spoke of his rituals, the sacrifices, the murders he'd committed in the name of something darker than death itself. His words were graphic, horrific, a sick confession of years of torment and bloodshed. When I begged for him to let us go, he just smiled again. "You must be hungry," he said, tossing a knife onto the floor in front of us. "Feed yourselves." With that, he left, locking the door behind him with a sharp, ominous click. Days passed, maybe weeks. The hunger gnawed at us like a beast inside. There was a window in the basement, but it was boarded shut, and though our chains weren't connected to anything, we couldn't escape the room. Ezekiel was the first to break. He collapsed, gasping for breath, and within minutes, he was dead. We were starving. Tom looked at Ezekiel's lifeless body and suggested something I'll never forget. "We have to survive," he said, holding the knife. "We have to eat." I screamed at him, horrified, but he didn't listen. He carved into Ezekiel's flesh and started drinking his blood, the metallic scent filling the room. Sarah and I retched, vomiting in the corner, but eventually we couldn't fight it anymore. Tom offered us pieces of Ezekiel, and though I swore I wouldn't, I did. I don't know how long we lasted like that. Days blended into weeks, The room was a mess of blood and rot. One day I woke to find Tom unconscious and Sarah unchained. She stood up, her eyes vacant, and told me she was going to find help. She made it halfway up the stairs when an unseen force, threw her back down. Her neck snapped with a sickening crack. I screamed for Tom, but he didn't wake up. I was alone now, hungry, terrified, losing my mind. It must have been months since we disappeared. I didn't want to die, but the hunger was unbearable. I picked up the bloody knife and dug into my friends. I didn't want to, but I had to survive. The old man returned, watching with sick satisfaction. "You've done well," he said. "Now you're ready." But I wasn't. Not for him. I stabbed him as he turned, plunging the knife into his back, and ran. My heart pounded in my chest as I reached the stairs. When I grabbed the door handle, I expected it to be locked, but it wasn't. It opened easily. The realization hit me like a sledgehammer. We were never trapped. The door was never locked. We could have left at any time. We were too blind, too scared, too stupid to try. I ran faster than I ever had, all the way home. When I finally found my parents, they didn't believe me. No one did. They told me that I had been missing for 5 years. 5 years of my life gone, and the police found nothing when they searched the house. Now I'm here in a psychiatric hospital writing this down. No one believes me, but I know the truth. He's still out there. It's only a matter of time before he finds me again. My friends and I cannot stop playing a board game. It ruined our lives. I can barely remember what life was like before we found the game that June night. We were 6 high school kids, bored out of our minds, trying our best to fill the void. Most of us had part-time summer jobs, but we were hesitant to spend money on anything. We all hoped to save for college. After what felt like hours going back and forth on deciding what to do for the day, we took a walk around our suburban neighborhood. It was the end of a yard sale day, and most people were packing up and heading inside. A few people still remained outside, eager to sell. We didn't really have the intention to buy anything, but I still combed through the last pieces of used crap people set out. I always think I'm going to find some kind of amazing treasure, but always end up questioning my purchases hours later. I found myself digging through a shoebox full of old board games. I thought I might be able to find a new game for all of us to play. I also figured since it was the end of the day, I might get it for super cheap. At first, I only saw games that looked in too bad of shape to even buy. That, or it was a game I knew my friends wouldn't want to play. I've always been a board game fan, but not so much my friends. I had to beg them for months to play D&D with me, and they were only willing to play it for my birthday. I'm always trying to find new games that might interest them. I was ready to give up, but then I saw a game at the bottom that I'd never heard of. Tasks with Friends, with the tagline, "The game you and your friends will never want to put down." The box looked colorful and pretty worn out, but not so bad that we couldn't play with it. It just looked well-loved. I tried to open it up, but the sides were taped down. I mean, it makes sense. You don't want all the pieces to come flying out after all. I didn't see a price tag or sign for the price, so I found the owner and asked her, "Excuse me, how much are you charging for the game?" I said eagerly to the woman while admiring the bright colored box that lacked any company branding or trademarking. That old thing? I don't know. Do you have $1 on you?" the woman said as she put the yard sale leftovers into one big box. As she told me the price, I perked up and started to dig through my purse. She either got annoyed with me taking too long or just wanted to be nice and told me to just take it. She immediately started to back up her box again. Is the game any fun?" I said to her awkwardly. I actually never played it. My friend Jen gave it to me a few years back because her kids got obsessed over it or something, so she just wanted to get rid of it. She thought my family would enjoy it, but we just never got around to playing it, she said with her back facing me. I kindly thanked her and called for my friends to come over to see what I got. As I called for them, I could see their curiosity over what I found. That excitement was quickly lost when they saw I had a board game in my hands. They rolled their eyes. knowing that I would try and get them to play it with me. Kate, you know we don't do the board game thing, Aaron said to me, annoyed. Come on, guys, you've all been going on and on all day about how bored you are. At least try. This game looks really fun. I actually haven't played this one before, so we can all learn together, I said, as I saw their faces start to grow curious again. James came up to me and gestured at the box in my hand. I gave it over to him, hoping that he would be convinced to play after looking at it. I knew if he was down to play, everyone else would be too. As he held the box, I could see the expression on his face change from doubt to excitement. Damn, this game looks like fun. Let's go play, he said with a giddy tone I'd never heard him use. He started to jog in the direction of his house, with me close behind, and the rest of our friends slowly walking behind me, looking confused as to why James was so excited to play a board game when he was normally the person most against them. We all made it back to James' house. We walked in and were greeted by his mom, confused as to what made her emotionless son so excited. As we stood in the entryway, not sure what to say, we heard him calling us from the basement. We ran down the steps to see the game, fully set up on the floor and ready to play. He was sitting on a pillow reading the instructions with intense concentration. James, are we actually playing this game? Bree whined. Yes, we are. I promise. If you just sit down and start to play, you will have fun. I had a chance to learn the rules while you guys got here, James insisted as he shuffled a pile of cards one last time. After a few minutes of back and forth, everyone was sitting down and ready to play. James explained the rules of the game directly from the intrusion manual. Each player starts with their token at the start of the board. Players will take turns drawing a card from the top of the deck. Each card will have a task. If that task is completed, you may move the number of spaces that are specified on the card. Once you see the card, it will say secret or public at the top. If it's a secret card, do not read it out loud. This task must be completed without anyone noticing or questioning the action on the card. For example, hold someone's hand, sing a song, insult someone, etc. Just complete the task without anyone calling you out. If a player does something you believe to be a secret task, say out loud, "Deceiver!" If the player was caught, they will show their card and fail their task. Do not move any pieces. If the person who calls out "Deceiver" wrongly accuses the player, then they must move back one space. The accused player will keep that card and continue to try and complete the task. Once you have successfully completed a secret task, you may announce task complete and move your token forward as many spaces as specified on your task card. If you pull a public card, you must read it out loud. These cards will include things like saying the alphabet backwards, don't say or until your next turn, singing a karaoke song, playing dead for 1 minute, etc. Some cards have time limits and specific instructions. Every card will clearly state the task. The player who gets their token to the end of the board wins. The game will start with the player who lied last drawing a card. Take turns drawing one card at a time with the person to your right going next. Have fun! James folded the paper instructions up and sat them by his side, asking if anyone had questions. No one said anything. It seemed like they all understood the game fine. Or maybe they just didn't care yet. All right, let's get the game started, James proclaimed, but was met with blank stares. Come on, guys, I just read the rules. You should know how the game starts. We have to start with who lied last. Everyone remained silent. No one wanted to say their last lie. This is so dumb. I guess I'll go. I told my mom that Henry wasn't hanging out with us when I left the house. There, I'll go first, Bree blurted out as she leaned forward to grab a card. As she looked at it, she rolled her eyes. This is so dumb. Why are we playing this game? Come on, Bree, it can't be that bad. Can you read it out loud? Henry said, sensing that the card was embarrassing. Ugh, public card, pretend to be a cow for 3 minutes. She threw the card down and looked at Henry, who was to her right. Expecting her turn to just be over and not wanting to even try, the rest of the group started to laugh and encourage her, chanting her name and begging her to do it. After about a minute, she gave in and got down on her hands and knees. When she first started, she was annoyed, staring daggers at Henry. As her time ran down, I could see in her face her feelings towards the game change. When the timer went off, she didn't stop for a few seconds. She kept going because she was laughing so hard. Or what? So fun. Someone move my token up one space. Henry, it's your turn now, Bree said with a giggle and a newfound excitement. Henry looked at her in disbelief. He was so used to her cold exterior, but liked that this game made it melt away. Henry picked up his card, he motioned, zipping his lips shut, and shook his head. Me, Bree, and James all squealed in excitement, with the rest of the group looking lost, not understanding what they missed that got us so excited. Since Henry had a secret card, it was AJ's turn. She was chuckling along, but clearly just doing it because she didn't want to look dumb for asking us what was so funny. She pulled her card and read it out loud. It's a public card, she said with a dry tone, trying to gauge the room and observe everyone else as they celebrated her public card. It says I have to do jumping jacks until my next turn. As she stood up, everyone in the room cheered her on except for Aaron. As she got to her feet, she paused and looked over at Aaron. I can imagine he felt like the only sane person in the room. And I wasn't sure what was going on. After a second of hesitation, she started her jumping jacks. Aaron looked around at us, eyeing him down desperately, waiting for him to read his card. By the time he finally picked up his card, AJ had started to laugh while doing her jumping jacks. Sorry, it's a secret card. Aaron said nervously as everyone wiggled with happiness. Well, Humbands, looks like it's my turn, I said as I leaned forward but was cut off by Henry quickly standing to his feet and lunging towards AJ, tackling her to the ground, interrupting her jumping jacks and making a loud thump as they hit the ground. Henry, what the hell are you doing? What's wrong with you? Aaron yelled in a serious tone that turned into him trying not to laugh by the end of the sentence. I'm calling a deceiver on that tackle, Henry, Bree stated with a laugh. Okay, you got me, Henry said while still laying on AJ from his tackle. They both smiled over the event, even though it clearly hurt when they hit the floor. But you have to admit, that one was tricky. I tried to start my turn again, but was interrupted by Aaron. Task completed, I yelled at Henry and didn't get caught. I get to move 2 spaces, he said as he smugly moved his token 2 spaces on the game board. We kept playing the game for hours. We finished the first game and everyone wanted to play again, and again, and again. I looked around at them in disbelief. It felt impossible that all my friends were enjoying a board game. It was a dream come true. After years of begging, finally, normally at hangouts like this, by 10 p.m., Bree and Henry would wander off to make out in some closet. AJ goes home to sleep, and Aaron, James, and I are left to awkwardly try and find something to do with just the 3 of us. It got to be 2 a.m., and we were either exhausted or our parents calling us, telling us to come home, or we would be in serious trouble. Every once in a while, Bree would move to a different section of the house, and we all went back to our houses, but all had a hard time going to sleep. We stayed up until 5 a.m. for some of us, just talking about the game over text, strategies when we could play again, funny things that happened that night. We couldn't get enough. The games we played started out pretty simple, no tasks got too wild, and while we really loved to play, it wasn't like it was taking over our whole lives. Not yet, at least. Because we played the game at James's house the first time, we ended up just keeping it there, even though the game was technically mine. We always hung out at his place, so it just made sense. It was around 10 a.m. the next day when our group chat started to blow up, with everyone asking when we could get together that day. Now, because it was summertime and we were all teenagers, we either had work in the mornings or most of us slept until noon, but not me. I was always up early waiting for my friends to get up so I had something to do, or trying to make some money as a dog walker. That being said, I was shocked when I saw that everyone was up and everyone claimed to not have work. James didn't have a job at that point, so of course he was free, but everyone else was too. That did not happen often. We all met up at James' place at around 11 a.m. that same day, everyone eager to play. We must have played 10 games that day. The games consisted of us doing accents, being banned from saying certain words, backflips, and so on. Nothing too weird. We realized after a few games that we never got a repeating card, not one time. This was strange because there were probably 200 cards in the deck, but even with us playing a dozen games, every card was new. I knew I had a couple of dogs to walk that evening, but texted the owners to cancel. No way was I going to leave while all my friends were enjoying a board game this much. I knew AJ said something about her having a shift at 4 p.m., but when the time got close, she went to the other side of the room and called out of work. She didn't even mention it to us or talk about it. She just stood up, walked to the corner, talked to her manager, and came back. No one thought anything of it. After a few minutes, she loudly proclaimed, "Task completed," moving her token up 3 spaces. We looked around, confused at what task she had, and the card said, "Call out sick to work." We were surprised by this card, to say the least. It was the first time a card had to do with something outside of the players. Everyone else in the group canceled any plans they had for the rest of the day, although AJ was the only person who completed a task for it. It was around 11 p.m., which made it a full 12 hours of the game. Bree pointed out that we forgot to eat any food all day. After thinking about it, I realized that I hardly drank any water and went to the bathroom like 1 time all day. Things started to get out of hand that night. AJ pulled a card that said to go into a closet with the player to her left and kiss them for 5 minutes. Of course, that player was Henry. Bree was not happy, but she knew how serious everyone was about the game. She told him she wasn't okay with it, but he insisted that it was just a game and it wouldn't mean anything. It was worth 4 points for both people who would go into the closet immediately. AJ and Henry stood up and went to find a suitable space, all while Bree freaked out and said she would end things with Henry if he went through with it. It was never completely clear what Henry and Bree were. They don't like to use boyfriend and girlfriend, but everyone knew they were a thing. Aaron tried to call it off, saying this wouldn't be worth it and to just stop, but it was like they didn't even hesitate. Bree sat on the carpet and started to cry as the timer on her phone counted down an agonizing 5 minutes. I thought I would either hear kissing or nothing at all, but instead I heard talking. It started as soft whispers, then crying and yelling. They stayed in for about 2 minutes, then came tumbling out. They said, "That's it, Henry. I can't believe you would do that for a game. We are over," Bree said with a red, wet face. Henry came and silently sat down with AJ. AJ was now beet red as well. Despite 3 of my friends just going through something I couldn't wrap my head around, they all looked at James calmly and nodded for him to pull his card. No one had moved any tokens forward, so it was clear they failed their task of kissing in the closet. James hesitantly leaned in for a card and read it to himself as we were bombarded by Bree, AJ, and Henry all saying, "Task completed," and then shot confused faces at each other. They all threw down their cards and moved their tokens forward. Bree's card said break up with Henry, Henry's card said make AJ cry, and AJ's card said tell Henry you love him. All those cards were worth way more than the stupid kissing cards, so the kissing task was ignored, and they all individually completed our tasks without ever communicating it with each other. They all saw opportunities to complete a task worth more points, and they took it. After this moment, it was like nothing even happened. The girls stopped crying and started laughing and saying how impressive the completion of the tasks were. "Wait, guys, something is wrong here. Do you not see it?" Aaron said with concern, trying to take a break from the game. "Oh, stop. You are just jealous you didn't get to move 6 spaces," Bree said with arrogance. "No, I'm not talking about that. Does no one find it weird that the cards are using our names now? Not only that, but the cards are somehow interacting with other cards to almost try and make bad things happen," James blurted. As he said that, it was like we all froze in our spots, all looking at each other, realizing how hungry and tired we were, looking around at the room, seeing how big of a mess we made. Bree grabbing Henry's hand with a look of sadness and coming to grips with how they hurt each other for a game. I looked down at my arm and was reminded of the crud things I had drawn on my arm with Sharpies in order to move one space in an earlier game. I saw Aaron's jeans that were now cut into shorts with some kid's scissors. I looked at James's legs and saw his one shaved leg lying crossed over the untouched hairy one. I looked at AJ and saw she had a huge purple bruise on her arm. So, at that moment, I remembered feeling like an addict trying to get off drugs. I knew this game was hurting us. I wanted to stop, but felt like I couldn't. I could see the same feeling in all my friends' eyes, too. The urge to say, one more game, just one more time, just to feel the high of this dumb game again. I think we need to take a break from this game, guys. It's getting kind of weird and out of hand, I murmured, with the strength that I somehow mustered up. It was like telling an alcoholic you were taking away their beer. They all looked horrified at the idea of not playing the game for even a moment. Just then, James' mom came downstairs and was horrified at what she was looking at. 6 disheveled teenagers all sitting in a circle, looking like they had all just been through a war. Not only that, but her whole basement was a mess. James, what the hell happened to your leg? Are you all playing that dumb game again? I can't believe this. Everyone out of my house. James, you are grounded, his mom shouted with rage in her voice. We all ran out of his house, not saying a word to each other, just trying to get home and get some food. As I sat in my kitchen with my long-sleeved sweatshirt covering my now inked-up arm, I tried to eat a sandwich I made myself. I was starving. I could feel and hear my stomach growling, but my need to play the game was so much stronger. So strong I didn't even want to eat. I sat at my dining room table staring at that sandwich for what felt like an eternity, telling myself that I needed to eat and I'd feel better if I did, but somehow the thought of the game was taking up all my energy. I was holding back the urge to text my friends. It took every ounce of self-control I had left. I felt my phone buzz in my pocket, and I involuntarily grabbed my phone so fast it was in my hand before I could even think about it. It was James in our group chat. Hey guys, so do you think that was a long enough break? I think I can find where my mom put the game and bring it to that old treehouse back behind Mr. Baker's house. I couldn't hold back anymore. I had to play again. Before I knew it, I was sneaking out of my house trying to remember where the old treehouse was. As I ran through the neighborhood, my phone lit up with texts from my friends saying they were on their way. After running around for a while, I found the treehouse. I couldn't believe I had such a hard time finding it, considering how much time a few of us used to spend in it during middle school. I could hear all their voices sounding annoyed as I was the last one to get there. I climbed up the old wooden ladder to find all my friends sitting in a perfect circle, barely able to see the board or each other. It was around this time something strange happened within the game. It wasn't about winning the game necessarily, it was about playing as many games as possible and completing as many tasks as we could. If anyone won a game or finished a task, everyone felt a high, not just the winner. Because of this, players stopped calling each other out for trying to complete secret tasks, so people stopped being so secretive to complete secret tasks. They still kept them a secret because it was a rule of the game, just no one called them out. This made us all more ruthless. I sat down on the hardwood in between Bree and James. Our next game began. AJ drew a card first, and it was a secret card. She didn't seem giddy. She looked flush and scared. In fact, it felt like the mood had shifted with everyone. We weren't laughing our butts off anymore. We were terrified to stop playing. It was something in our guts that made us have to play. Like a virus growing in us, desperately trying to get out. Next, Aaron drew a card and read it out loud. "Hold your breath for 5 minutes," he whispered with confusion. "How am I supposed to do that?" he said, trying to not get worried. It's not that the card was all that bad, it's that he knew he would stop at nothing to make it happen. He told us to keep playing the game while he did it and got a timer up on his phone. He took a few deep breaths, then held his nose shut and became extremely focused. not making eye contact with anyone. Next, it was James's turn. He had a secret card and didn't show much emotion towards it. Next, Bree nervously took a card, and yet again, it was a secret card. In fact, we all drew a secret card until it was Aaron's turn again. It had been about 45 seconds, and he was really focusing, and we didn't want to make him draw a card while trying to finish his task. As we sat and watched our friend become more and more red from holding his breath, we found ourselves in complete silence. Other than the wind weaving its way through the trees outside and the soft sound of crickets in the distance, we all just stared at each other, terrified of what was on those secret cards. I knew I had to use every little bit of self-control I had left in my body to not try and complete the task on my card. I was betting that's why everyone was being so quiet. They all had tasks that they didn't want to do, but felt the uncontrollable urge to do it. My card said that I needed to remove one of James's fingers by any means necessary. It was worth 10 points. I couldn't believe I wanted to complete it so badly, but I was frozen, figuring out how to do it. As I stared at him, I noticed he was looking over at Bree. I figured that his card had something to do with her. It seemed like everyone was fixated on someone else. I glanced down at the timer Aaron had, and I was amazed to see he had been holding his breath for almost 2 minutes. Just as I was about to comment on it, chaos broke loose. Everyone jumping on to someone else, making it one big pile of people viciously grabbing each other. I didn't read their cards myself, but it was clear by their actions what their tasks were. Of course, as you know, I was going for James's fingers, but James was ripping at Bree's ear. Bree was pulling Henry's hair out. Henry was tearing at AJ's neck, and AJ was trying to open my mouth to get my tongue. For a solid 30 seconds, we were all attaching each other when Aaron passed out from holding his breath. This seemed to snap us out of our trance for a bit. We ran over to our friend and checked his pulse. After we realized he was still breathing, we got lost in the game again and all jumped on each other to keep brutalizing one another. Just as I got my teeth around James' pinky finger, we saw a bright flashlight coming through the cracks in the treehouse and froze. A police officer popped his head through the bottom entrance to the treehouse and looked at us in horror. He saw Aaron out cold in the corner alone with the rest of us in a pile of blood and ripped out hair. The officer grabbed us one by one and practically threw us to the ground, where another officer put us each in handcuffs. We had hours and hours of questioning that night, but we were all released by sunrise. No one was badly injured, just a lot of cuts, bruises, and a few patches of hair missing. Even Aaron was okay. Honestly, Aaron made it out in the best shape. We all got grounded for the rest of the summer. All the parents agreed that we need to stop spending time together because they insisted on us having some beef between us all. None of us mentioned the board game was at the treehouse that night because we didn't want them to take it away from us. We knew we had to play it again. However, they caught on to it and banned us from ever playing it again. We spent the next 3 weeks of summer miserable. Each one of us tried to fill the hunger to play the game by playing other board games or attempting to remake it, but it wasn't the same. It was the night before school started and I got a message from James through Skype. Our parents banned us from talking to each other, but it seemed my parents and James's parents forgot about Skype. He told me I had to come over right now. I managed to hop out my window and ran for James' house. I got to his house in what felt like record time and jumped down the fire escape to the basement. There, I saw the rest of my friends all sitting by the fireplace, weeping. As I got closer, I saw they were covered in ash. I saw tiny little bits of what was left of the game lying out on the ground. She burned it. My mom burned it, James said in between tears. Everyone was desperately trying to find any pieces that were left of our precious game. Some of them rubbed the ashes of the game on their faces and arms to try and feel something again. As I watched them, I saw something in the corner of my eye. I looked over to our normal hangout area and saw it. I saw the board game sitting out. Not just the box, but the whole game was out and ready to play. The game was out and 2 players were missing from the player in the game, the OP. Are you sure that your mom burnt it, James? I said, as my eyes got glazed over, looking at the beautiful board game sitting out for us to enjoy. Yes, I'm sure. She did it right in front of me, so I'd stop looking for it. Just as James finished his sentence, he looked at me and then at my eye line. He saw the game. The next week of our lives was a whirlwind. After James' mom burned the game and it reappeared, we all ran away with the game. We stole a car from AJ's mom after we got a task card for it and left town. We would play the game in the car, in random fast food restaurants, and sometimes in parks. It's all we did all day. We would fall asleep playing the game and only manage to eat maybe a bag of chips or something small during the day. We kept moving because we didn't want to be found. In that week, we all managed to lose our jobs and all missed the first week of our senior year of high school, all because we were addicted to a board game. I still remember the last game we ever played. It was a late Sunday night. We were actually in our town sitting in an old barn near the treehouse we sat in before, all because the board game told us to. Up to that point, we were hanging out far away from home. We didn't want to be so close. We knew we could be found easily by our families and the authorities if we were too close, but we had no choice. And I think, we were slaves to the game. At this point, we were in bad shape. With every new game started, we broke down a little bit more. We surrounded the board with tired eyes and growling stomachs, missing teeth and bruised bodies, concussed heads and broken toes. Please, we have to stop. I can't do it anymore. I want to go home, Bree said as we were about to start our next game. I can't imagine not playing this game. It's all I ever want to do. I think I might die if I couldn't play it. I know the game hurts us, but it would hurt so much more if we stopped playing it, Henry said with a gravelly voice. Guys, why are we talking? We have to play again, Aaron said while trying not to cough. I know we have to. I've never hated something and loved something so much in my whole life, Bree remarked. We started the game with shaky hands, moving slowly and holding our breath whenever someone looked at their card. AJ went first. She reached down and picked a card, cringing to herself after reading it in her head. Next was Bree. She rolled her eyes and she read off the words. A public card, waterboard the player to your right for 5 minutes. Both players move 8 spaces, Bree timidly said as she glanced at James sitting next to her. I can't say we really knew how to waterboard someone, but we laid him on his back with his legs elevated and dripped water over him. We let him take a card for his turn before Bree started the waterboarding, so we didn't have to wait for 5 minutes for them to be done. His card was a secret card. We continued the game with the awful background sounds of gagging and choking. Next, it was Aaron's turn. He read his card and winced. He closed his eyes tight and opened them again, as if he was hoping he was in a dream. As he opened his eyes, he slowly looked at all of us, making eye contact with each one of us. Just then, James was done being waterboarded and he and Bree came to join us. I was so glad they were done, not just because I was sick of the sounds, but because it meant they got to move 8 spaces. Aaron stood to his feet slowly. I prepared myself because I figured he was about to hurt us. In an instant, he ran out of the barn and into our stolen car. We all looked around confused as to where we went, but kept playing the game as he drove off. Next, it was my turn. Public card, jump off the roof of the barn, 9 points. I said out loud nervously. Henry and AJ jumped up and started to walk outside, not even questioning if I would do it or not. They weren't wrong in the assumption. Before I could even think, I was on my feet, trying to find a way up to the roof. I found my way to the top of the 10-foot tall building. I took a deep breath and leaped off and was met with a hard thump as I hit the ground. I felt a gut-wrenching pain in my right ankle as I landed. I knew I broke it. I had no doubt in my mind. I was thrashing in pain, grabbing my ankle as my friends dragged me back into the barn. We knew we had to keep playing. Next, Henry took a card. He picked it from the pile with his eyes closed and brought it to his face while peeking just enough to see the words on the card, then closed his eyes again, trying to pretend he never read the words in the first place. Next, AJ took a card. Even though it was a secret card, I knew it was about me. She glanced down at my ankle right after her eyes left the card. Just as James was reaching for his card, we saw Aaron walk back into the barn. We all sat in shock as his silhouette became clear and vivid in the doorway. Blood trickled down his arms and hands, dripping on the dirt as we all stared at each other. His eyes were blank at first, but then turned to pain. We watched him as he walked from the doorway to the gaming board, blood dripping on the game as he moved his token 30 spaces. Aaron, what have you done? 30 spaces? AJ muttered in fear. James, I'm so sorry I had to, Aaron whimpered, as sat in the dirt with his secret task card crinkled in his bloodied fist. Tell me what you did right now. What the hell does your card say? Show us, James yelled as he stood to his feet. Just as James was about to jump onto Aaron, Henry reached into his pocket and pulled out some matches we used to start small campfires while we had been on the run. We all stood still, waiting to see what he was about to do, as he lit 3 matches and threw them into the nearby hay bales, igniting the whole inside of the barn. Without hesitation, AJ saw the opportunity and stomped on my ankle as hard as she could. If it wasn't broken before, it sure was now. I looked down at it to see it now bent sideways. She then stomped on my other ankle, not breaking it, but making it so I couldn't walk. She moved her token 12 spaces. Even though I was in agony from the pain, I still felt such an intense high from her moving so many spaces. Aaron dropped his card in the midst of everything happening. James fell to his feet to see the card and started to weep as he read it out loud. Secret card, kill James's mom. Move 30 spaces, he said with anger bubbling up. I can't believe you would do that for a dumb game. How could you do this to me? I couldn't control myself. Come on, you know what I mean? I couldn't control myself. Don't do anything you will regret, Aaron said cautiously. Oh, I think it's a little too late for not doing things we regret, James said as he jumped onto Aaron, choking him with all his strength. It seemed at that moment he was able to break free from the control of the game. He wasn't feeling the high of someone else completing a task. He just felt hate. Red hot hate. I was overwhelmed, to say the least. The barn was in flames. James was trying to kill Aaron. And to make matters worse, AJ out of nowhere jumped up and dug a pocket knife into Bree's stomach. Now, Bree and AJ were in a fighting match too. Henry and I sat across from each other in disbelief at our surroundings. He looked at me with death in his eyes as he reached for a card. It wasn't even his turn, but I don't think he cared anymore. He knew the others would be occupied for a while. The fire was getting bad. I knew I had to get out of that barn as soon as I could. Because of the damage done to my ankles, I couldn't walk, so I dragged my body out of the barn, taking the game with me. I made it a few feet and looked back to see Henry not moving. He set his card down on the board before I started to drag it with me, and I read it as I continued to crawl. Secret card. Let the fire overtake you. Move your token to the finish line and win the game. I was able to get out of the barn with the board game in hand. I sat and watched as the flames overtook Henry. He didn't even flinch when he caught on fire. As I saw it happen, I moved his token to the end space so he could win the game. I felt an intense high overtake my body as the game was complete. Only a few moments after Henry caught fire, the whole barn came down. With all my friends in it, I looked at the burning barn and then back down at the game. I'm ashamed to say that my biggest worry was not knowing who I'd play with now. I hate myself for thinking that, but that's how all the game is. I tried to start a new game by myself and drew a card, but that's when I saw the sirens of police cars and fire trucks pull up next to me. I was immediately surrounded by people trying to give me medical attention, taking me away from my game. I scratched and threw my body around like a toddler not getting their way. I remember them giving me some kind of sedative and waking up in the hospital. I was the only person to make it out alive that night. All I could say to the doctors and my parents was that I needed the game, that I had to play the game. That it was the only meaning to life, it was the only reason I had to live. My parents got me a great lawyer and I got out of everything by pleading insanity. Our families all knew the right people and had the right money to ensure the word never got out about the deaths. They even managed to make the death of James' mom disappear. When they told me my friends were all dead, I didn't have much of a reaction. I just kept asking where the game was. When they eventually told me the game was gone and never coming back, that's when I lost it. They had to put me into restraints because I kept hurting the hospital staff from my meltdowns. I started to threaten the staff and told them all the horrible things that would happen to them if they didn't get that game back to me. I eventually ended up in a psychiatric hospital. I yelled and screamed so much that I never had my voice. I hardly ever slept because all I thought about was the game and how I craved to play it again. My skin was red and torn up from my insistent picking due to the withdrawals. After months, I felt numb, maybe from all the drugs they pumped me up with, or perhaps I was so used to the withdrawals I didn't feel it as much. It still felt like I had an uncontrollable urge inside my bones, but I was able to hide it. They then sent me home after a while. I knew I had to mask my emotions for the game, pretend I didn't care anymore, even if it killed me inside to say it out loud. I walked into my bedroom and I felt like I was being treated like a baby. My old bed frame was gone and it was just the mattress on the floor. All my sharp shelves were taken down, along with anything else I could possibly hurt myself with. I rolled my eyes, but knew my parents had to make these changes for me to even come home. I sat on my bed and I looked around at my room. Now, with a doorknob that locked from the outside to keep me in, as well as bars on my windows. I searched my room desperately to find something to take up my mind. That's when I dug through my closet and I saw it. I saw that beautiful, colorful box that I came to know so well, just hiding in the back of my closet, waiting to be found. I knew. It came back the first time it was destroyed, but it was feeling like it was a one-time thing. But here it was, patiently waiting for me to come and play it. I ripped open the box, giving myself a paper cut in the process, and started to play the game by myself. With all that being said, I can finally say, task completed, and share what my first card said in that solo game. Secret card, spread the word about this game online so more people can join us. Move 20 spaces. So what do you say? Care to come join me for a game? My girlfriend talks in her sleep. She's been saying the most horrible things recently. I'm infatuated with her, utterly infatuated. And it wasn't at a healthy level, far from it. I would think about her every moment she was away. I would sometimes sit on my couch and just stare at my phone, waiting for her to text. I'd tell myself, don't contact her, don't. It will come off as too strong. But then I'd still find myself clicking her name on my contact list before my inner voice would continue. You don't want her to know how desperately smitten you are with her. It's unattractive. It will scare her off. No, you must wait for her to call you this time. But it was excruciating and exhausting, almost unbearable. I once heard that the ancient Greeks believed that falling madly and irrationally in love with somebody was a curse that you would wish upon your enemies. I could never understand what they meant. After all, isn't falling head over heels in love the ultimate goal nowadays? But now that it's happened to me, I have to say, the ancient Greeks were right. This is a curse. I was barely in control of myself, almost as though my infatuation with her had possessed me. The two of us were sexually active together, but still in the dating phase. We were at that make-or-break era of a blossoming relationship where we'd either have the talk and formally be in a relationship, or we'd start to slowly drift apart. The latter of which I don't think I'd be able to cope with. Honestly, I wouldn't be able to. Almost everything about her captivated me. The way she held her hand over her mouth when she laughed, how she'd caress the pendant of her necklace when she was frightened, how she'd twirl her hair and her finger when she was excited. All of it. Her smell, her smile, her eyes. Yeah, I know. It probably makes you sick reading about it. I feel the same way. I was never the hopeless romantic type, but now I can't stop fantasizing about her. I'd think about us doing the long 3-hour hike up to that magnificent view from one of our first dates, to that first kiss as we overlooked the lights of the city. But this time, I'd get down on one knee, bring out the ring, and, well, you know what would happen next. All right, fine, I'll stop. Yes, this is a girl I'd only been casually dating for a couple months. I shouldn't be thinking about proposing yet. I know that. I'm just barely able to control myself any longer. I feel as though I'm losing power over the decisions I make. And that brings me to why I'm here writing this out at the moment. It started with the first real thing that troubled me about her. We'd never actually spent a night together. No matter how late she was over, once either of us showed signs of being tired, she'd up and leave. She wouldn't leave awkwardly or in anger, just a casual kiss goodnight, a smile, and a call me soon. It was something I didn't really even notice the first few times she did it, but after almost 8 weeks of dating, it was becoming strange. I'd have to ask her about it. It took drinking almost an entire bottle of wine before I had the courage to do it. She looked almost defeated when I asked and lowered her eyes in embarrassment. I knew this talk would come eventually, she started. She took in a deep breath with a long, drawn-out exhale. Recently, she paused again. I've started talking in my sleep, she shook her head in embarrassment. It's called somniloquy. I looked it up. I shrugged and laughed out loud. My demeanor seemed to say, "That's it?" "No, Stephen. Listen," she said. She wasn't laughing. "It's bad. It's completely out of control. It's not just random words or gibberish. No, it's horrible. I say horrible, disgusting things." She was starting to raise her voice, breath heavy, and tear up. I approached her and held her. I told her it couldn't be that bad. I told her to spend the night. I told her she was probably exaggerating. I was wrong. That night she stayed at my house. But she warned me of something before falling asleep. "Whatever you do, don't wake me up. It makes me really scared and disoriented if that happens. And don't respond to me, just ignore it." I nodded and agreed. "If it becomes too much," she continued, "just leave the room and sleep on the couch. I won't mind." I told her not to worry about it. I told her that it wouldn't be a big deal. I told her I wouldn't leave to the couch. I'd stay beside her in the bed. But I was wrong. I couldn't even last one night. We both fell asleep without incident. I don't know how many hours passed, but I woke up in the dark with the sensation that someone was watching me. And then I remembered she was with me. She was actually spending the night. I smiled. But then I noticed the shadowy outline of her, sitting up on the bed. She was looking down at me, staring. It creeped me out, I'll admit it. Her posture was entirely different. It was as though it wasn't even her at all. Then she spoke. It wasn't her voice that I heard. It was much lower and gravelly, like something out of a horror movie. "I'll chew the skin from your bones," she said. I froze. At first, I just kept looking at her. This was not at all what I expected. I thought it would be more like the way Tourette's is often portrayed, just random swearing and shouting. I honestly thought to myself, what will I do if she attacks me right now? What if she really does try to chew the skin from my bones? But then she just lied down and went back to sleep. I was creeped out. I tried to lie back down and ignore her, but struggled. I couldn't even close my eyes without thinking maybe she's sitting up again and staring at me. And then one time I rolled over to look at her, and she was. Her face was pressed right towards mine. Her breath was foul and rotted, something that was most certainly not normal for her. She spoke again, in the same voice as before. "If you don't move to the couch, you'll be dead by morning." That did it for me. I sat up in a moment and headed for the living room. She made some sort of wheezing sound as I left. I think it was supposed to be laughter. I was lying on the couch, but I wasn't going to be able to fall back to sleep. I was far too shaken. I was staring out towards the window, hoping to see the first few hints of the sun rising. And then I thought I heard something. From the bedroom, I listened, and then I heard it again. Stephen! It was that same low and gravelly voice. It sounded like a witch. I tried to just ignore it at first, but then it continued. Stephen? Still, I said nothing. I know you can hear me, Stephen. You're awake now. Why don't you come back into the bedroom? The voice barely sounded human. Or maybe you'd prefer if I come to you? I still didn't say anything. I was told not to. But I listened. If I heard her start walking towards the bedroom door, I'm not even joking, I would have run right out of the apartment. But she had asked me not to respond to her sleep talking, so I didn't. And then I heard her once more. Sorry if this spoils your plans, she began laughing. The two of you were supposed to walk that trail again, she started. I wasn't even remotely prepared for what she'd say next. You'd both be so tired when you'd reach the top, you'd look over the city, then you'll get on one knee and bring out the ring. She began laughing, and that's when I realized this wasn't just a problem with sleep talking, it was something much more. Something supernatural. I had never told anybody about my proposal fantasy. There was simply no way she could have known about any of it. This was no longer about merely talking in one's sleep. This was about possession. I can't go back into the bedroom. I have no idea what would happen if I did. Instead, I'm going to wait it out, holding up in my living room until the sun rises. I have a couple more hours yet. I can hear her laughing occasionally in the bedroom. It's still not her voice, still that same low-pitch cackle. But as I sit on my couch writing this out, here's what scares me the most. Maybe my infatuation and utter obsession with her wasn't normal. I said before that I felt like I was losing control of myself, more so I believe than the typical falling in love story. No, I feared that the infatuation I felt was the entity slowly taking control of me, of it controlling my thoughts, fears, ambitions, and anxieties. Maybe once I become completely absorbed, a transfer would occur and she would be free of it. I know I should leave, that I should open the front door, get in my car, and drive away from here. But I can't. I can't leave her. I've already lost control. I'm infatuated with her. Utterly infatuated. I found a priest's diary from 1910. The contents of it haunt me to this day. I've been working for a cleaning company for a couple of years now, and you see some weird stuff, but nothing compares to what happened at the old Fisher house. The memory of that day still crawls under my skin, and sometimes I wonder if I'll ever shake the feeling that something is watching me. Something dark. It started like any other job. Mrs. Fisher had passed away a few weeks ago, and her family wanted the place cleaned up so they could sell it. The house was big, a dusty old thing in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by thick woods that seemed to swallow up the sunlight. It was one of those places that immediately felt wrong the moment you stepped in. The air was stale, thick with the smell of rot and neglect. Every step I took on the creaky wooden floors echoed through the empty rooms, the only other sound being the wind outside, rattling the broken windows. I started in the living room, wiping down furniture and sweeping the floor, trying to ignore the uneasy feeling that had settled in my gut. It was in one of the upstairs bedrooms where I found it, a small, leather-bound diary tucked under a loose floorboard. The diary looked ancient, the pages yellowed and brittle, the leather cracked from age. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe it was just some old family keepsake. But when I opened it, something changed in the air around me. The first page was written in shaky, old-fashioned handwriting, dated July 12th, 1910. It was signed by a priest named Father Augustine. His words were strange, like he was documenting something terrible that had happened. El Mino Patrius et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. I write this to recount the horrors that befell the village of St. Cuthbert. for my soul will never rest until the truth is known. I kept reading, feeling a shiver crawl up my spine. It began with the children, their laughter twisted into screams, and their eyes turned black as night. One by one, they fell to the curse, speaking in tongues, writhing like serpents upon the ground. At first, we thought it was a sickness, but it was not of this world. It was the work of the devil himself. The room suddenly felt colder, and I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone standing behind me, but the house was empty. I was alone. I swallowed the lump in my throat and forced myself to keep reading. I was called to the village when the first child died. Her body twisted in unnatural ways, her mouth open in a silent scream. The villagers whispered of demons, of something unholy that had come to our land. I did not believe them. I was a man of God. I was a fool. The first exorcism failed. Deus in adiotorium meum intende. The words of the ritual did nothing. The child laughed, a laugh that was not her own. She spoke to me in the voice of 1,000 serpents, mocking God, mocking my faith. And then she died, her body turning cold and stiff in my arms. I slammed the book shut, my heart racing. Something was wrong. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach, a creeping sense of dread that was getting harder to ignore. But I couldn't stop myself. I had to know more. I opened the diary again, flipping through the pages. The priest's handwriting grew more frantic as the entries went on. His Latin prayers scattered throughout the text, as if he were desperately trying to cling to his faith. I have seen the face of evil. It wears the skin of the innocent, but its soul is black. The demon is no longer in one body. It moves through the village like a plague, corrupting, consuming. I tried to perform another exorcism tonight. It went wrong. So very wrong. Daemons me circumdederant. The demon was stronger than I could have imagined. It spoke my name. It knew me. It taunted me, saying it had been waiting for me. I could feel its presence in the room, crawling beneath my skin, filling the air with its stench. Suddenly, I heard a soft creak behind me. I jumped, the diary slipping from my hands and falling to the floor. I whipped around, my heart in my throat, but the room was still empty. The shadows seemed to shift, though, moving in ways that didn't feel right. It was like something was here, with me. I picked up the diary again, my hands shaking. I wanted to stop reading, but something was pulling me in, like the words had a power of their own. I flipped to the last entry, dated October 31st, 1910. The village is lost. The demon has claimed them all. Men, women, children. It moves through them like a plague, leaving only death and madness in its wake. I hear its voice in my sleep now. It whispers to me, calls to me. I know what I must do. This is no longer a battle of faith. This is survival. I will confront it tonight. Fiat voluntas tua. If these are my last words, let it be known that I fought, though I fear I fight in vain. The last line was written in shaky, barely legible script. I hear it now. It is coming for me. As soon as I finished reading, the wind outside picked up, howling against the windows. The house groaned, the floorboards creaking as if something heavy was moving through the halls. My breath came in short, panicked bursts, and every instinct told me to run, but my legs wouldn't move. Then the whispers started. They were soft at first, like the wind slipping through cracks in the walls, but they grew louder, more insistent. Words I couldn't understand, spoken in a language that made my skin crawl, the same language that Father Augustine had written in. Demo, demoent, ad te venunt. The room seemed to darken, the shadows stretching across the walls, twisting and writhing like something alive. My heart pounded in my chest, and I backed toward the door, clutching the diary like it was my only lifeline. But then I saw it. In the corner of the room, barely visible in the dim light, a figure stood. It was tall, its skin pale and stretched tight over its bones, its eyes black and empty. It didn't move, but I could feel its gaze on me, cold and malevolent. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment I was frozen in place, unable to look away from the thing in the corner. Then it smiled. The smile stretched impossibly wide, splitting its face in half, revealing rows of sharp, blackened teeth. And then it spoke, its voice a low, guttural rasp that seemed to echo inside my head. Fiat voluntas tua. I bolted. I ran faster than I've ever run before, down the stairs, through the darkened halls, out the front door. I didn't stop until I was in my car, slamming the door behind me and fumbling for the keys. The house loomed in the rearview mirror as I sped away, its dark windows staring after me like eyes. I never went back to the Fisher house. I quit my job the next day, moved to a new town, tried to forget everything I'd read in that diary. But I can't shake the feeling that something followed me. The whispers still come at night, creeping into the edges of my dreams, filling my mind with dark, ancient words I don't understand. And right now, as I'm writing this, I feel like I'm being watched, like there's something standing in the corner of the room smiling. I hear it now. It is coming for me. Someone sings to my daughter at night. I've found out who. Lila is the prettiest little girl you've ever seen. Frosty gray eyes flecked with ebony, curly brown hair, and the thickest, longest eyelashes. When she smiles, her eyes form little rainbow shapes, and dimples speck her cheeks. All names have been changed for privacy. When she first called me Mommy, my heart swelled with so much love and joy I thought it might burst. Every night, for as long as I can remember, I read her a bedtime story. She loves the one about the panda and the tiger. We've been reading that every day for the past 2 months. She never gets sick of it. Recently, I had to go for an overseas work trip for 5 days. It broke my heart to leave my family. I know it's a short time and shouldn't be a big deal, but I hadn't taken a single trip without my family ever since Lila came into our lives 5 years ago. It was heart-wrenching saying goodbye to Lila. My husband promised he would take good care of her, and I believed him. He's a great dad, but I couldn't help but worry. My husband texted me throughout the first day overseas, updating that Lila was happily distracted by a playdate and a new stuffed toy. She seemed to have forgotten about me, he joked. Once I was done with a mind-numbing slew of meetings, I hightailed it back to the hotel and hopped on a video call with my husband and Lila. Lila was so happy to see me. She smiled and chatted happily about her new rabbit stuffed toy and her new friend. But after a while, she cried and asked when I would be home. I tried to cheer her up and read her a story via the call, but she just got more upset and cried louder. She kept saying she wanted her mummy. We had to end the call so my husband could soothe her. My heart sank when I realized that my video calls would only trigger her, remind her of my absence. With a heavy heart, I told my husband to monitor how things are and let me know if a video call would be helpful or unhelpful the next night. We did another video call the second night to the same results, tears, pleading, shouting. We agreed that I would just send her night-night voice messages and to hold off on seeing her until I was home. The third day, my husband kept me updated frequently, knowing how worried I get. We skipped the video call, and an hour after her bedtime, my husband told me that apparently Lila had gone right to bed and fallen fast asleep. Part of me was relieved that she wasn't having a hard time. Another part of me felt hurt. I know it's dumb. She's a child with a short attention span. It's easy to forget about the lack of pesky things like your mum for a night. Now that I feel a slight, deep, low pain in my chest, is it ever gonna go away? The fourth day, my husband's updates were a lot less regular. I figured he had his hands full juggling his work, household chores, and caring for Lila. He did say everything was fine, so I held on to that and busied myself with work. We both agreed to skip the video call that night as well. The fifth night, right before I left the hotel, to catch my red-eye flight home, my husband video called me. It was about an hour after Lila's bedtime, so I figured maybe he had some trouble putting her to sleep. Maybe she wanted to see her mummy before she slept. Excitedly, I swiped to answer the call, grinning ear to ear. The sight of my husband's pale face doused my grin. His black hair looked limp and unwashed, and his eyes were rimmed with dark circles that made his dark brown eyes look almost black. "What's wrong, love?" I asked. "Everything all right? Is Lila okay?" "Do you hear that?" he asked. "You know what?" He held a finger to his lips and mouthed, "Listen." Fear and exhaustion etched his face. Dread churned my insides. I kept quiet and tried to make out any sounds. I could only hear his breathing. And mine. "Love, you're scaring me. Where's Lila?" He looked defeated. "She's okay, she's asleep." "What was I supposed to hear?" "Nothing, it's not there now." "It's not there now." An edge sharpened my tone. He broke off, and his eyes widened. "Listen," he whispered, holding the phone close to his lips so I could only see his nose and the lower half of his eyes. I was about to tell him to knock it off when I heard it. Singing. Someone was singing. It was a beautiful voice, sweet and gentle, yet somehow it sent chills stabbing through my spine. "When the wind blows, the cradle will rock," the faint notes wafted from somewhere. To my husband's side. "It's the child monitor," he whispered. "I switched it on the last couple of nights. Someone's been singing to our daughter." "Oh my God, get to her now. Go," I yelled, and he pulled out one side of his earpiece. "I've tried," he whispered urgently, cutting me off. "Last night and just now I ran in. Every time. There's no one in there with her." He sounded hollow. "I don't give a damn. You get in there right now. Protect our little girl. Now." He stood up and walked to Lila's room. I wanted to smack him, to tell him to run. He hesitated before pushing open the door, and I hissed in his ear. I could still hear the singing and made out the words, "No one's as dear as baby to me." The door swung open, and my husband stepped in the room. He held his phone out so I could see. The room was dark, but Lila's nightlight was on. There was no one there. Lila was asleep in her little tatami bed, a small smile on her face. The singing had stopped once he entered. There was only the sound of Lila's gentle snoring. He backed out of the room and shut the door. "You see?" he whispered, walking back to the living room. "No one. There's no one there." "Did you check the windows?" I asked. I knew there couldn't have been time for anyone to climb out of the room. Still, I had to be sure. Air locked, grilled, as usual. No one was in the cupboards, too. Last night I checked. I felt a cold vice tighten around my neck. I hadn't thought of checking the cupboards. "Check it again, now," I commanded. He sighed and went back in. He opened the cupboards. Nothing. "It's really cold here," he said quietly. He looked everywhere, and I supervised, pointing out possible nooks and crannies. Nothing. He showed me that the window was still locked. When he went out to the living room, we were both quiet for a while. "I've got to go. I got to catch that plane, fly home to you guys, take care of Lila. Just sit by her bed, sleep in her room, all right?" He nodded, and a touch of relief lit his eyes. "I can't wait to have you back," he said. The 4 hours on the flight were torturous. I spent the time researching online to see what I could find. For the first time, I splurged on the plane's Wi-Fi service. Everything seemed to point to spirits, but that made no sense. We had been living in our house for a decade, long before Lila's arrival. Nothing like that had ever happened in our house. What was singing to my daughter? The thought hammered away in my mind. My chest squeezed painfully, and cold sweat began to seep from my forehead and hands. "Are you okay?" the lady next to me asked. I looked blankly at her, then excused myself to the bathroom on board. My reflection startled me. My jet black hair was in a wild tangle. My hair claw must have loosened in my mad sprint to the taxi, and from the taxi to the departure gate. I had no reason to run. It was not like the flight could take off earlier, but I ran anyway. I redid my hair and stared at myself in the mirror. "Calm the fuck down," I instructed myself, staring into my dark brown eyes. I took a few long, deep breaths, then returned to my seat. My husband had sent me a short video. I clicked on it, but it took forever to download on the plane's shitty Wi-Fi. I had to restart the download multiple times. "Can't see vid. Text?" I sent to my husband. No response. I kept clicking on the download button, hoping that the Wi-Fi would be stable enough for the video to go through. It was a relatively small file, so I had hope. The video loaded. I tapped on it multiple times, legs shaking with impatience. It was an 8-second video. It showed darkness. Then the vague lines of Leela's room took shape. Singing. Over the cradle, mother will sing. My chest tightened painfully. The view shifted to Lila's face. She was awake, staring at something above her. Mama. Her cute little voice sounded. My heart sank. The video cut off. I nearly screamed. It finally hit me what could be singing to my daughter. My heart in my throat, I typed in a name I had forgotten about for the past years, but will always remember. Haley Bowden, Lila's birth mother. It was a semi-open adoption. I knew who the girl was, met her once, but never again. She never contacted me, and neither did my husband and I want to contact her. We would only let Lila know of her if ever she expressed the desire to know her biological mother. A selfish part of me wanted to be the only mother Lila knew before my son left home. So I just wanted to... Haley was a drug addict. She had stopped using for the most part during her pregnancy. Her family had wanted her to abort the baby, so she moved out to a shelter for young moms. My heart ached for her when we met. A petite, skinny 17-year-old with a belly that looked grotesquely large on her small frame. Her eyes were set in deep hollows, and her cheeks were deathly gaunt. Still, there had been something beautifully innocent in her lovely gray eyes. She spoke in a childlike way, which I guess she still was in a way. She wanted her little girl to have a good life, one unencumbered by her. I cried when she said that. It ripped my heart open to witness the love this girl had for her unborn daughter. There was a naivete in her actions and words that made me grieve for her circumstances. A sweet young mother-to-be accepting separation from her daughter before she was born. All over drugs. I wished Haley well, told her that if she needed help staying clean, she could come to us. I gave her my email on a slip of paper. My husband jabbed me sharply in the arm. Then Haley never did reach out. We didn't see her again, only had Lila handed to us by the adoption agency. I had no idea what had happened to Haley. I tapped the enter button and the results took a few seconds to load. I didn't have to scroll long before I found it. 22-year-old Haley Bowden, dead from a drug overdose. Her body had been found tossed out on the streets. She had died just 3 months ago. My heart sank and a hollow blossomed within my chest. Haley was dead. I should have reached out. I should have offered help, shown some compassion for Lila's biological mother. I read all the articles I could find about Haley. There were few. From what I could gather, she had left home 6 months before her death after a huge fight with her parents. They were sick of her drug habits. She had to clean up or get out. She got out. Why didn't she reach out? I would have helped. Something clicked in my mind, and I went to my email. I typed in Haley in the search box. Nothing. I breathed a sigh of relief. Then I tensed up again. I went to my spam folder and typed in the same search term. There it was, an email from Haley. Hi, Joanne. Haley here. I have no right to ask you for help, but I'm in a really bad spot. I don't need much, just a place to stay. Or just to see Lila once. Seeing her would mean so much to me. It would be the motivation I need to get clean. I won't tell her I'm her mother. I just want to give her a hug, talk to her, sing to her. Please, Joanne, I have no right, but I beg you. I need to see my daughter. Love, Haley. A warm, sour sensation welled up in my eyes. She had reached out, and I had missed it. She needed help, and no one gave it. Tears spilled over, streaking my cheeks with guilt. I froze as I reread the message. Sing to her. A wave of nausea swept over me. She was back, singing to Lila. Did she want to take Lila from us? Did she want payback for my failure to help, despite what I told her those years ago? I've been quietly losing my mind. I have another 20 minutes to go before touchdown. My husband has not been responding to my frantic messages. What is going on? Is it really Haley singing to my baby girl? Is she going to take Lila from us? Am I losing my mind? What if it's something else? Not Haley, but something else. 19 more minutes. I'm crawling out of my skin. I can't take this. No. My husband just texted. It won't stop singing. Fuck. The plane's finally descending. I'm sending this out and I'm making a run for it once I land. Oh God. I can't lose Lila. I can't. Please help me.